Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Thank you. First of all, appointment of substitutes.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just got one substitute tonight. That's Lynn Denham, and she's here for Jabba Rears.
Thank you. Second item, declarations of interest. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to disclose that I'm an unpaid trustee of Lippard Hub.
Thank you. Any others? Public participation, we have no public speakers this evening. And item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of January 2026. Does anybody have any comments to make? Not seeing anybody. In that case, are we happy to approve the minutes of the last meeting? Everybody looks ecstatic. Good. Okay, that takes us to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Worcester Community Trust Annual Update Report 2024-25. I'm going to hand over to Tom.
Thank you, Chair. As members will see, there's a report, covering report in the pack this evening, which outlines a summary of activities by Worcester Community Trust. This evening we're joined by Helen Davis, the Chief Executive Officer of Worcester Community Trust, who's here to share a presentation. I propose, Chair, that rather than going through the report, we hand over to Helen, and then through herself and myself afterwards we can take any questions. Thank you.
That sounds like a good plan. If you're happy, Helen.
I am, thank you very much, both. So yes, my name's Helen Davis, and I'm going to take you through the presentation this evening, which will showcase some of the work that took place during 24-25, and then I want to sort of focus on a little bit of 25-26, but look forward to what we're looking to achieve in 26-27. So hopefully I've got the clicker, and ultimately I should be able to go through this. And it's working perfectly. So let's have a review of 24-25. You've all had a copy of this, and I'm not going to go and read through every detail on this presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a financial summary based on 24-25, income, expenditure, surplus, and then total funds carried forward. We then move on to what we saw take place in our community hubs during that year, which was the investment via Worcester City Council and the Towns Fund grant, which included then the construction of Building Block 2 in Dines Green, which finished in April 25. And across that year, from our hub's perspective, we generated income of £329,910 from hiring our spaces within that time. We also looked at how we could improve and help from an environmental perspective, and we were awarded a grant to enable us to put solar panels on the roof of our Dines Green community building, and also looked at reducing the efficiency, lowering the efficiency around the lighting, so replacing any bulbs with LED lighting and motion sensors. Our projects worked directly with just short of 3,000 people during that period. That is people working directly with our projects. That's not the footfall that came through the door in that year. I've got two screens, apologies, because I'm pressing it on there and I can see it and you can't see it, so apologies for that. Those projects that year, 24-25, saw our domestic abuse project. Again, you've seen the data on there. I think one of the biggest things that stands out for me from this particular project is that number around children now living safer lives. It's 437, which is, it's sad to see that number, but also very positive in another way that we see that amount of children that are now living safer lives because of that project. Our Joy and Core project, again, you can see the numbers on there, but you can see the numbers that were enrolled on programme, but actually, in addition to that, interventions, there were an additional 320 interventions with individuals that were supported through that project. A lot of those were around suicidal ideation that was in intervention purely from that perspective. Snack and Chat, which has been a fantastic project for many, many, many years, reducing loneliness and isolation. And that's seeing, 166 people come through the door, but seeing that 83% of people that attend that group are living in a single person household. So it's a valuable service that, like I said, we know it's been around for a long time. That year also we had our Connectors project, which came to an end in September 2024. It was funded through National Lottery. Our welfare services, again, we can see that on there statistically, it's supporting more than 200 people were supported via our wellbeing job clubs during that period of time. Our youth service, you can see there that the numbers coming through the door were regularly attending. That's the amount of attendance overall, not individuals. So the 1819 is attendance of each week coming to clubs. 98% of those attending gave positive feedback and also included improvements in their mental health, well-being following their sessions. I've got some, a little bit later on in the presentation, when I'll talk a little bit more around youth. We also then looked at that year around our asset-based community development funding. Again, this is a project where you don't typically mark a number off of people that you see, and it's about conversations it being had, not necessarily the amount of people. And it's building that confidence and trust and empowering community members. And again, I'll touch a little bit more on that later on in the presentation when we look at what is our strategy for 26-27? What does our new business plan look like? What are we wanting to achieve as an organisation? Volunteer hours, we clocked up just over 3,000 hours of volunteer time. We enabled nearly 1,500 people to access skills and training through our various projects, and we served just shy of 8,000 meals during that year. Okay, that was very much a whistle-stop tour of 24-25. But what I'm really keen to do, because I think what's really important, is that we're looking at the future of WCT, partnership working, what the focus is. We'll look a little bit reflective on what some of the work that we did during 25-26. But I wanted to start off with, at the end of this month, our current business plan comes to an end. So we spent a large part of last year looking at, with the support of the board, the senior leadership team, and an independent consultant, looking at what do we need? Who are we? What are the needs of our community? We chose to go with an independent consultant. We wanted to really understand from stakeholders, members. We didn't want to be that person getting that feedback. We wanted it to be somebody independent, and that's why we engaged with the consultants Mindgap. So our new strategy will outline the future vision, setting out the service that will be built on along any emerging priorities that come our way. During that time, when we engaged with, these were the different groups of individuals, people that we engaged with during that consultation period. Community members, we engaged directly with 96 people from the community. From that feedback, that was a variation of speaking to people face-to-face or via an online survey. 672 pieces of feedback, questions and responses came out of that. We engaged our staff. We were really keen to understand from our staff's perspective, what did we need to do as an organisation? And from that, we had 108 pieces of feedback. Stakeholder engagement, there were 8 people, one-to-one interviews and surveys, 27. So again, total number of people that we accessed during that consultation period was 150 people. And our consultants had to digest and deliver for us a document that took into account every single piece of that feedback, because every piece of that feedback was key to us as an organisation to form our strategy and our business plan for the coming 4 years. I wanted to give you some headline findings of what comments, feedback we received during that consultation process. So again, WCT has built a strong foundation of trusted services, dedicated staff and priority neighbourhoods, but we're at a little bit of a crucial junction. There was a slight decline, a trust decline, funding uncertainty, leadership and service inconsistency, and communication gaps. So the next 4 years presents a clear opportunity for us at WCT to present a clear opportunity to rebuild trust, strengthen services delivery, position WCT as the region's leading community anchor. And again, I'll go into a little bit more detail what we mean by that when we get to look at the sort of themes that came out and what our plan will look like. Just some other little bits of information. I'm doing exactly the same again, so apologies. And that's what you're seeing on there are some of the key themes that came through out of that consultation work that took place. One of the biggest things, and I don't think there was anything in there really that we found as a surprise. We know there's a huge developmental area with youth. There's a need to review the balance between programme-specific funding and providing hub space and welcoming spaces for people in our community. And again, I'm not going to run through all of those on there as you've got access to the presentation. So what that did was look at what are our 3, the exact wording of these have not been signed off by our Board of Trustees as yet, but these principles are our 3 pillars of delivery that we are looking at to deliver in 26 and onwards for the duration of our business plan. So inclusive and sustainable spaces, what do we mean by that? We have some beautiful foyer areas through the Towns Fund investment, and then you walk into the toilet area that looks like it's probably back in the 1970s. So what we want to be able to do is that experience of a journey somebody coming into our hubs is that we transform those tired spaces that are shut away from that main area that now looks absolutely phenomenal from the investment. We want to turn underserved spaces into vibrant, accessible community assets. We have an extremely strong focus on community and youth-based provision. Fill crucial youth service gaps and build the next generation of hub users. We want to collaborate with partners. We are not a one-stop shop for youth delivery services. We can't do everything on our own. We need to do that in partnership with other organisations within the city. And that's exactly what this strategic pillar, but what we do feel and what we've recognised is that community and youth go hand in hand. If you're working with a young person, it's extremely valuable to be working with the whole family and not just a young person. And a little bit later on in the presentation, I'm going to take you through some structural changes that we've made and purposely done that to bring youth and community much closer together. The final sort of pillar of delivery, and again, this is the wording that we're just looking at the moment, is increased confidence through visible responsiveness and strong public identity. Something that's become very apparent to me through a process that I'm going through at the moment, which is putting an application into the National Lottery. They told us we don't shout enough about the amazing work that we do in the organisation. And we do one thing, and then as an organisation and as a senior leadership team, we move on to the next. The pace of the organisation is very, very quick. We need to stop and we need to showcase what we do as an organisation, and that is something that we are going to concentrate on for our next business plan. What will underpin those 3 pillars of delivery will be building an engaged, ambitious and supportive workforce, build a resilient, diversified income base, less reactive and more strategic funding, and partnership working, lead on collaborative working across the city ahead of April 2028. It's a really key point for us as an organisation, and we have some amazing organisations in the city, and collectively I think we can do perfect things together, but it's about building that partnership now and being prepared for that period of time that we approach. I was invited to group leaders and I delivered this slide at group leaders, and I felt it only right to do so this evening as well. It's not a great display on the screen, apologies for that, but I really wanted to give you an understanding from a hub perspective, a forecast of profit and loss with regards to the hubs. As you can see from the slide that we have there are a number of hubs that do make money and there are a number of hubs that don't. And overall, there is a deficit when it comes to running the buildings. This takes into account our maintenance agreements with the City Council. One thing we hadn't taken for granted when this presentation was put together was our management grant. So that now has been approved, but that slide there didn't take that into account. Okay. Wanted to update you also around some of our funding and some of the where funding is changed in the next financial year. So we have a contract with Cadent Gas, and we have for the last couple of years. They've gone through another wave of going to Ofgem of how much money can they put back to their Centre for Warmth. They deliver Centre for Warmth all over the country, and WCT is one of those. Their funding is less, which has had an impact on us as a delivery partner for them. So there's been a reduction in funding going forward for the next financial year of £75,000. Our domestic abuse project will continue for the next 12 months, and that has been confirmed, but there's been no increase in funding for the year of 26-27. Our Joy project came to an end through the end of funding in December 2025. That per year brought in £260,000 into WCT. Youth, we have had the privilege of having a grant from municipal charities over many years. They have their own financial challenges, and we will not be receiving our youth grant from municipals for 26-27. We had Everson that contributed to our youth activity in the last financial year. Everson will continue to fund us as an organisation, but they won't fund the same project twice. So that funding will come away from youth, but will be redirected into another part of the organisation. I was really keen to share that information with you and the information around hubs, because the next slide shows the work that we started with our senior leadership team and our board of trustees last year. It refers back to the financial sustainability of the organisation, and for that we wanted to look at our structure. Our structure previously was that we recruited a project manager when we were allocated contracts, funding. What we're finding with a lot of the funding at the moment is 12 months, 2 years. We're seeing skills that we're losing from the organisation that have been recruited into those project manager posts. We also see a lot of the time that the senior leadership team are being pulled into very operational activities where we want to be, if we focus back on earlier on, we want to have that strategic overview of funding. We want to be proactive, not reactive. And so we've introduced a, sort of taken away our project managers and introduced a contract manager, program manager, which will have then a strategic lead or a project lead, sorry, in each area of delivery. So as you can see from there, our current projects that we have will have a contract manager and a lead that's a technical expert for each of those projects. We as a senior leadership team, there are a few administrative roles that we had in there and we've taken those away. And the administration and the funding applications will sit across that SLT and with myself as chief exec. Whatever didn't want to happen was never impact frontline delivery staff. This structure doesn't do that. It's looked at that layer from a project manager perspective. In December, I was appointed as chief exec. So from February last year, I was in the interim position. And then I just want to bring you up to speed really with where we are so far and what we're currently working on. So one of the things in the interim period that I was chief exec last year, the National Lottery Climate Action Fund sort of hit our radar. And it was something that really inspired us as an organisation to work collaboratively with other organisations in the city. So we put our stage 1 application in. First round, it was rejected. However, I kind of didn't want to stop there and go, okay, so we went back again. We've been successful in stage 1, and on Monday morning, we will be submitting our stage 2 application. The project is about partnership working. We have collaborated with key partners in the city. I've engaged with the City Council and the waste team, the County Council, around what's going on from a county perspective. The Lottery Climate Action Fund is very focused on working with individuals that are extremely far away from climate. We did some surveys out to residents last year in preparation for this application, and a lot of the response was, Scott, I can't impact it. It's nothing to do with me. How could I change things? It also highlighted an area in the South Asian community that, again, are really far away from climate. Our core partners in the project delivery for this will be Mela. It will also be Demo 84, which are a newly formed CIC organisation based in the city, but it will also look at key other partners, and that will be the city, that will be the county, that will be housing providers. Our three aims of this project, if we are successful, will be to educate and support long-term climate champions. It will be looking at bringing repair, cafe and exchange groups to our hubs. It will be looking at improving understanding of the recycling system. We know from the short time that I've been on this project that contamination rates in the city are extremely high. The pizza boxes that get put in the recycling bin because people think that they can go in the recycling bin and they can't. And it's become something for me now that, regardless of the outcome of this is something that WCT absolutely want to concentrate on. So I just wanted to give you that feedback. That application will be going in on Monday, and it's a key thing for us as an organisation. Oh, I think my clicker might have stopped. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. Brilliant, thank you very much. I just wanted to also show our own kind of environmental with the support of the city around the hubs as well. So we have had, in the last month, solar panels fitted to Horizon Ronkswood, and we'll be coming up with KGV, so King George V. So they've been installed at Ronkswood and Horizon, and also on building block 2. And that was thanks to the Towns Fund grant as well. And we'll be looking at King George V from solar panels, air source heat pump, and new windows there as well. We've just recruited into a post, which again has been supported by UK Share Prosperity. It's a 12-month post to look at supporting young people that are not in education, training or employment. This will be working collaboratively with GLP training that work out of building block 1 and 2 and offering support and pathways for those young people. Something that we've seen in our youth sessions is that these young people can sometimes slip under the radar, but actually we can access them through the youth activities that we run and engaging as well with partners. So that will be going live shortly. But and I just wanted to give you kind of an update on GLP really. They're delivering boot camps, so Worcestershire residents are benefiting from those. But they've actually done a collaboration with Tudor Grange. It's a bit of a prelim to the Future Pathway Mentor. And they've engaged with year 9 and 10 taster days where they've come into building block 1 to look in it. And there were young people that perhaps were not engaging too much with the educational system. But actually what was delivered through GLP was looking at, okay, maths might not be exciting at school, but if you want to be an electrician, there's an element of maths that you'll need. And it was just talking to the young people in a more practical way. And it was a brilliant collaboration. I don't think I sent the documents over, but if you'd like to read more, there is an executive briefing and an outcome pack for that collaboration with Tudor Grange School. And you'll be glad to know that's my presentation completed. So thank you very much. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much for a hugely informative and comprehensive presentation. Really appreciate that and that level of detail. From my perspective, really reassuring to hear that through your consultation process, you didn't seem to shy away from what could have been some quite difficult feedback and some quite difficult conversations. And that gives a really positive indication as to the strategic direction the organisation may be going in the future. So thank you. Opening it up to members with any questions. Councillor De Serra.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just thank WCT for the support that you've given to the couple of projects that I'm working on. And then I had a question that you probably want to take offline. Okay. You've obviously supported Open Door Cafe for the last year and a bit, which is still going very, very well. And also both sets of the football that we've been running at Warndon, so we do appreciate that. It's the only thing we're able to offer the youth in the area that I'm aware of, so it's definitely something we want to be able to increase and build upon. It won't by itself, it hardly touches the sides, but at least it's a start, you know. And the nice thing about the football on the Saturday mornings is that final session can come in and have some lunch. And I don't know any teenagers who aren't starving all the time, so you know we're there to feed them, so that's nice. Now my question was, I do get from time to time diners at the ODC who for various reasons have missed being able to go to food bank but actually have no food for the next few days, and I'd like to look into setting up funding for just a little store cupboard of tin goods that we could keep in our cupboard at the hub separately from ODC to give out on those occasions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, yes, and absolutely happy to have those conversations with you. Thank you.
Councillor Amos.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank you as well for your presentation. I was very pleased to hear, just towards the end, you mentioned skills boot camps and things like that, because I really do think we need to move away from the idea that we've got to find things for young people to do in their spare time, their leisure time, to really occupy them, to kick them off the streets, as it were, when the central issue really is getting them into jobs, into work, some kind of work experience. The latest figure I saw was that approaching 20% of 16 to 24-year-olds are NEETs. which means they're basically sitting at home doing nothing because they're not in anything. And that's alarming, and I suspect in some of the areas you work in, that figure is higher than that. And obviously, apprenticeships, you touched on this, and that's why I'd like you to briefly develop the point, because what we're finding is that youngsters for whom school is, they probably outlive school, to be honest, in the current state. But nonetheless, they've got skills, and otherwise they're sitting at home doing nothing. We need to find something for them to get them into a job, and they do have skills. You know, carpentry or whatever, electricians, engineers. We've seen them as we go around the county. So I'd like to get a bit more information about Tudor Grange. Perhaps you could send that to me separately rather than detain the committee. But any information you've got, any encouragement you can give about shifting the emphasis of WCT to getting youngsters into work rather than giving them things to do in their spare time, because I think that really is the way forward. Otherwise, the figures I've seen are frankly alarming, and you're fighting a losing battle as society and the economy is as well. So we need you to help us, and we will certainly help you, I can promise you.
Thank you for that. And actually, apprenticeships and the world of skills is my background pre-WCT. And that's one of the reasons we pitched for the UK SPF, because actually we see a real need for those young people, and they don't know where to go to. And I absolutely see, you know, we are engaging with county, because I absolutely know that county have the educational team as well. So this is a collaborative project, and these taster sessions, they're building block 1 and 2, will absolutely put them, and that's why we have that pathway mentor to guide them through that process. But I'll happily send you the additional information that I've got.
If you need any more help, just let me know.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to thank Helen for a really informative update. The scale of activity across the 6 hubs and the range of services that you deliver, including youth work, domestic abuse support, and tackling isolation, that clearly makes a difference to residents across the city. And what I find particularly interesting is how your report helps us to understand the different ways community centres and the provision operates in the city, because we seem to have 2 approaches. We've got the whole multi-hub approach, your model, which is delivered through WCT and supported by significant grant funding, contracts and partnership programmes. We also have independently run centres operating with volunteer governance and parish support. Both approaches, I think, are really important and strengthen our communities. Understanding these different approaches and models is going to be really important for us going forward as we move towards reorganisation. And I think we need to understand how we think about the future of community provision across Worcester. How important has external grant funding been in shaping the work that you do and the services you offer?
It's been really important. I think what we don't always look at, and it was something that we brought to group leaders, that these buildings, to have them open and accessible by having our projects enables us to have these buildings open much longer as well, because we have the staff in the buildings. We're not having to pay a dedicated hub manager that has to be in there from 9 till 5. So actually having the projects and the support from a hub perspective, they complement each other really well and allows those doors to be open for much longer periods of time.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I'm pleased that I supported through my ward funds last year for Joy programme, which supported women in Nunnery to tackle loneliness and isolation. I'm glad that you supported on that as well. I think over 15, 15 women benefited from that. And I'm happy to continue my support in future as well. Just a request, I'm being a bit selfish. If you do more youth pavilion at the Bronxwood Centre, it's a bit centralised for Warndon and Dines Green, but that's my request. If you can do it, thank you.
It's absolutely an ambition of ours. I want youth, you know, collectively as an organisation, we want youth back in all areas. We strategically just need to look at how we physically do that from a financial perspective. It's a passion, it's an absolute focus for us as an organisation, and we want to see it across all 6, so it is a priority for us.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. I think you'll be quite pleased to know this. I was at a peer review update earlier today, and one of the councillors mentioned that he was so interested in the WCT model that he's asked more questions and to replicate it within his own area. So I thought it was quite a sort of encouraging win for you. It's been admired from elsewhere in the country. But I was wanting to ask about the Dawn, which I supported. You mentioned that there was 101 new domestic abuse champions, and that was a wonderful number. Are they local people, trained volunteers in the communities that are forming a network, so there's much more structure and much more availability for support, is what I was wondering.
Thank you. Yes, they are trained local individuals. There are a network. We have a dedicated person that looks after our DA champions within the organisation. That project, again, is continuing to be funded for the next 12 months. I've got lots of visions for those champions, because I think there's also an opportunity, and we were discussing it today actually, around people coming out of our domestic abuse project, to have those individuals that are trained to almost be their sponsors, that support mechanism, that actually once they move out of the project, they can always come back to us, but they have somebody locally that they can connect with. So yeah, I've not spoke with our senior leader that looks after that project at this point in time, but it was something that became really apparent today, that actually that model, I'm really keen to engage with businesses locally to raise that profile as well. And that's certainly something we want to look at. Thank you.
Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to building block 2, so obviously it's one of the councillors for Dines Green. I was a big supporter of the building of the building block 2 at the Green Centre, and it's now been open just about a year effectively, isn't it? So have we got any indication about how many people are actually engaging with that service, and any feeling for, you know, the sort of breadth of what kind of people are actually getting involved? And obviously Councillor Amos has already referred to NEETs, and that's absolutely brilliant that you're reaching out proactively to encourage NEETs to engage with a training provider. But have we got any indication about how many people are using it? And most importantly, as ever with these things, about outcomes, is there any indication about the impact? You know, if people are actually taking part in training, what impact is that having in terms of getting employment or upskilling? You know, because there's always got to be a measurement of the service we're providing and what impact it's having on people's lives.
Thank you for that. Exact numbers, I can get those over to you. I haven't got them with me this evening, but they are local Worcester people that are coming through our skills boot camps. And what GLP are then supporting them to do is to go either into apprenticeships. And apprenticeships are not for just young people. They're apprenticeships for all ages. So we are seeing people of all ages coming through the boot camps, which is lovely to see, where people are, or may have been in a role that they didn't see any progression, and actually they've come through the boot camps, learned a skill, and are moving on to opening their own businesses from that. But yeah, I do get a report in from GLP, so I can forward that and share that around. So I can share that with Tom to share with you all. But it's very well used, and people are local Worcestershire boot camps are Worcestershire people. And they have a mix in there. So they do have local organisations that send their teams in to be upskilled, that are predominantly Worcester-based people as well. I think in the last quarter, it was something like 80 people had been through building block 1 and 2. either through a boot camp or upskilling in a role. But they only report to me their numbers for Worcester or Worcestershire-based people. Brilliant.
Councillor Denham.
Thank you very much, and yeah, thank you to Helen for a wonderful presentation, and you know, your enthusiasm and vision to take forward Worcester Community Trust. I think it's fair to say there's been a checkered history over the years, and some of us have been councillors for a longer period of time, of sort of, you know, have seen chief execs come and go and have seen changes in vision. Really kind of appreciate the vision and what you're bringing to the table. And I think it's really important, you know, the level of challenge, you know, to operate a community organisation, a charity structure in the through the years of austerity and with the challenges put to you. I think, you know, we can all express the activities and what we'd absolutely love you to be providing. Unfortunately, you know, we, this council, don't have the funding and not able to commission the activities that we want to see in our communities. So I think it's really important, you know, and as you have been doing, to be kind of fleet of foot and to recognise opportunities and to bid for those and to bring funding in to Worcester and to our communities. So absolutely well done for that. And it's, you know, it is not about the buildings, is it? It's about the activities and the people within them and that live around them. So, yeah, well done. And I know if there's ways, obviously in terms of partnership, and I think, you know, the bid for the lottery fund, and I absolutely can see the value of, you know, working with partners, and we've, you know, put investment in with our recycling sort of education officer. I'm not sure that's quite the right job title, but recognising where actually to make the difference, that it isn't about kind of preaching to the converted and the people that know how to do these things well, but to work with all our communities and equal opportunity. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And was there a response there, Helen?
I was just about to say, thank you to Lloyd who passed the details through, and we've engaged with Lauren, and yeah, she's given us some really key data for the application. So thank you.
Again, thank you so much for your presentation, and lots of very considered questions and comments from committee here tonight. I'm sure in 12 months' time you'll be back, but how best would you like members to stay engaged with progress and with your strategic direction before you're next here presenting for us?
From my perspective, I really want to make sure that there's an open door in communication between ourselves and yourselves. I'm somebody that we won't always get it right first time. You know, we're trying to achieve the same thing. We're trying to change something that has been historical for many, many years. So we will try different models. It might not work the first time, and I'm really open to feedback and to be challenged. You know, when we're in it, sometimes we can be a little bit blinkered. So I really want to be, hang on a minute, Helen, what are we doing there? And actually, how is this working? We tested a model in Dines Green Youth. We had a member of the community that had an absolute passion to want to support those young people. They didn't come from a youth background, and they were economically inactive individual. We empowered that person and said, okay, you might not be qualified at this point. We can give you the skills, but you've got the passion. You want to help these young people. Come and work with us. That saw an instant increase in the young people accessing our service. and an instant trust built with that individual. And that is something that I want to do for all of our communities, not just one area. And when we talk about community-led buildings, I want somebody from the community to be sat here post my time. That is for me. So from your perspective, you know, through officers, through you directly coming to me, I just want to sort of emphasise the point that there is an open door. I want a two-way communication, and I'm happy to engage whichever way suits all of us.
Thank you so much. And for us, the recommendation for this is we're noting the content of the report and the work of WCT. So on we move. Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your time, and I will leave you to your evening. Thank you.
So item 6 is our private sector housing annual update. This is you again, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides a summary of the actions and activities of the private sector housing team over the course of the 2025 calendar year. It also seeks approval of a revised housing enforcement policy to take effect from the 1st of May this year to coincide with the implementation of the Renters' Rights Act. So during 2025, we saw a decrease in the number of contacts to the private sector housing team, including 30 fewer property standards complaints compared to 2024. We've spoken to neighbouring authorities who have reported a similar picture, and we believe that this relates to a number of factors, including sort of a milder and drier winter, where we tend to get more complaints and reports coming through, particularly around damp and mould cases, as well as increased responsibilities placed on registered providers through Awab's law, which came into force in October last year. When undertaking property inspections, officers use the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, HHSRS, as others might know it by. During the course of the year, the team identified 6 Category 1 hazards, which are the most serious hazards and place the greatest risk of harm to individuals, as well as 4 Category 2 hazards. That led to 7 notices being issued, which is broken down in the table at 3.5 of the report, the different types of notices issued, as well as an emergency remedial works carried out on one property due to immediate fire safety concerns. What featured as a particular focus of the team during 2025 was the renewal of the HMO additional licensing scheme across the city. So this is a scheme that was renewed for a further 5 years, and as a result, it coincides with the anniversary of when it was implemented originally, so lots of licences all fall at a similar time, so that generated significant demand on the service. So during the course of the year, 317 HMOs were inspected, of which 309 licences were issued. 154 of those HMOs that were inspected had conditions identified. Those conditions are then placed on the licence, and they're subsequently monitored until the issues are resolved. That's an alternative approach to addressing property standards issues without requiring alternative or formal enforcement action, but achieves the same outcome. The team have also continued to undertake proactive work, trying to identify unlicensed HMOs in the city. We did a particular focus on that during 2024, but that work continues and continued during the course of last year. The team also supports the administration of disabled facilities grants, which in partnership with our current home improvement agency, Millbrook Healthcare. 496 households received home adaptations during the course of the year, and enabling them to remain living independent in their homes. In response to empty homes, the private sector housing team write to all owners who have had homes empty for over 1 year. We have around a 4.6% contact response rate. So we do get some contacts back from those letters, albeit relatively low numbers, which tends to be an update on the situation of what's going on with the empty property. There's generally a very high turnover of empty properties, and around, I think there's an average during the course of 2025, an average of 23% of properties which were removed from the empty homes list had received a letter from the private sector housing team. So hopefully that sort of demonstrates a sort of direct correlation to our intervention and bringing some of those properties back into use. We're currently in National Empty Homes Week, and we've undertaken some comms to raise awareness to promote properties being brought back into use, as well as encouraging residents to report suspected empty homes so that we can look into those and investigate those further. So any promotion that members would like to do then is encouraged. As a result of changes to the enforcement powers being brought about by the Renters' Rights Act, we've made amendments to our housing enforcement policy, which has been brought to this committee for approval this evening and is attached as Appendix 1. We've worked with Jigsaw, which is the nationally funded programme that have been established to implement the Renters' Rights Act. We've been very fortunate that an officer from the council has been directly involved with the development of the national policy. So we've had first sight and been able to help influence the shaping of that policy. That's now been agreed on a national basis and will essentially be rolled out sort of universally, where the previous arrangement has very much been more sort of individually based approaches or regionally based approaches to housing enforcement policies. So we propose to adopt this policy. We have amended it to tailor it to Worcester. So whilst it keeps the fundamental elements of the national policy, there have been a few amendments to make it specifically tailored and focused to the needs of Worcester. And we're keen to get this, the reason for bringing it today is to ensure that it's in place, ready to be adopted from the 1st of May, so that we can begin to implement enforcement of the Renters' Rights Act from day one, essentially. So in summary, the policy is quite lengthy, and I don't intend to run through the detail of the policy, but essentially it reflects the government's approach to enforcement under the Renters' Rights Act, with the expectation of more enforcement activity, essentially, so more civil penalties to be issued and less informal enforcement activity. It does still retain discretion to officers to consider the most appropriate course of action based on individual circumstances, mitigating factors, etc., to enable us to take a proportionate approach, consider public interest tests, public sector equality duties, etc. It's also worth drawing to members' attention to, whilst the housing enforcement policy applies to all tenures, we do take a pragmatic approach to enforcement, particularly around owner-occupied properties. So whilst enforcement powers do exist around hazards within owner-occupied properties, we consider those on a sort of case-by-case basis. So if a property is in disrepair or there's a hazard in a property, issuing a civil penalty notice and fining somebody isn't necessarily going to achieve the best outcome for them, particularly if it's not affecting anybody else. Where we will always take action is where there's a risk or significant impact on others, such as neighbouring properties or the sort of wider community. But again, that's considered on a case-by-case basis. I did bring a paper to committee in January outlining in much more detail the impacts of the Renters' Rights Act, so I don't intend to go into any further detail around that tonight, but can answer any questions should there be any. But staff have been undertaking a whole range of training over the course of the past few months, both within the private sector housing team and sort of wider housing service, to ensure that we're prepared for the implementation of the Act this year. We're due to hold a landlord forum and a tenant advisory session over the coming weeks ahead of the Act coming into force. I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask a question about Millwood? You mentioned providing, adaptations, people stay in their own home. There is a resident in my ward who has been trying to get somebody to do an assessment for them. I think probably for more than a year now. That's quite a backlog. Have you got any view on how that backlog is being addressed and whether there's any hope that it might reduce?
Thank you, and I'm happy to look at the individual case afterwards if you want to send me the details to look into. So Millbrook Healthcare are the current providers of our home adaptations, home improvement agency, and deliver adaptations on behalf of Worcester City Council and the other districts. That contract is due to come to an end on the 31st of March, and a new shared service is being developed, which will be operating across the county and hosted by Wyre Forest District Council. Okay. So we're currently going through a period of transition between Millbrook and the caseload that they hold and that transferring to the new service. There is always a backlog of some degree, depending on the nature of cases. So I'd need to look into it to be able to comment further whether that sits with the occupational therapy service undertaking the initial assessment or where in the process that is. But I can take that away.
Thank you.
Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom, for the report. I think you know what I'm going to ask about, but I feel that I must ask a different version of the same question, which is about Category 1 hazards. Just to give a couple of examples of what those hazards are. So that's like damp and mould, so really serious stuff going on. Now, 6 Category 1 hazards have been identified, but the Worcester Private Sector Stock Condition Survey from last year showed that it's projected that 8.7% of the housing stock in Worcester would have a Category 1 hazard. And that equates to 3,249 homes, of which 1,466 are privately rented. So 1,466, and yet we've only identified 6 Category 1 hazards. So there's a huge problem here. People are suffering in silence by the looks of it. So all that's leading to the question, how can the council be more proactive in identifying Category 1 hazards? Because almost 1,500 homes have been identified as having a Category 1 hazard. That's damp, mould, falls. People are likely to fall in their homes. We can't just wait for people to report, because for one thing, they might be scared that their landlord landlord might find out that they've reported the hazard. How can we go to the property and actually identify the hazard and take enforcement action? Because we're here tonight to agree a policy, but it seems to me that policy is not going to be used, because 6 Category 1 hazards is a fraction of the almost 1,500 homes that have these hazards. So how can we be more proactive in identifying them and taking enforcement action? And I apologise for asking the same question, but I feel it needs to be asked again.
Through you, Chair. So just in terms of the stock condition survey, first of all, so the number of properties referenced in there doesn't necessarily directly correlate to that, is the number of properties with a Category 1 hazard. So it's done through modelling that's the number that could potentially exist in the city. So there's a bit of a caveat to that. It doesn't say that there are that many properties with Category 1 hazards that exist. Notwithstanding that, I think we understand and appreciate that there will be properties that where there are hazards, that we haven't been able to identify. And I think for me, the fundamental bit is around reassurance and communication to try and encourage tenants to report things to us. So we're largely driven by being notified or having complaints and reports coming into the service, following which we'll always inspect. And if we inspect and identify a hazard, then we have a duty to act. So where it's a Category 1 hazard, we have a duty to take enforcement action. With Category 2 hazards, we have a power, and we'll determine, depending on the severity of the hazard, will depend on what action's taken. That we always take some form of action, even where Category 2 hazards exist. So proactive comms to try and encourage people to come forward, reassurance to provide support in place. I think the biggest shift will be the Renters' Rights Act, frankly. It will provide greater security of tenure. So that concern about reporting a repair and therefore might be issued with a Section 21 is kind of removed through that Act. They can't just do that. And it gives us additional powers to undertake enforcement if that were undertaken, or there's sort of undue pressure put on tenants to do so. So it gives us a lot more strength in tackling the behaviour that might surround landlords putting pressure on tenants. So we're expecting more complaints certainly over the course of the next year. What we've I mean, it's slightly anecdotal, but what we understand is that some tenants may not have been reporting disrepair over the course of the past year, knowing that renters' rights is approaching, and therefore landlords might be more readily looking to serve notices for other reasons potentially. So that could be a trigger. So that's certainly something we don't have evidence to substantiate that, but that is potentially a contributing factor to the reduction in complaints that we've received. So I think the comms that we're planning to launch around the Renters' Rights Act, we're holding a tenants advisory session. We held a previous tenant drop-in session last year, as well as sort of raising awareness with landlords around their responsibilities to try and drive up those standards. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but hopefully provides some assurance.
No, thank you. Can I just have another go? So with the Renters' Rights Act, are we spelling out that Category 1 hazards is a thing that both landlords and tenants need to be aware of? Can we use the education about the Renters' Rights Act as an opportunity to remind people about Category 1 hazards? And I would emphasise as well that this is a statutory duty. This is not, well, we feel like enforcement action to improve private sector homes. It's not an optional. This is a statutory duty under the Housing Act 2004, and it says that in the report. So, 6 Category 1 hazards. I know I keep harping on about it, but the person who contacted me about this has a very good case. Yes, they have 30 years industry experience, but it could have been anyone that contacted me saying, what is this council doing about Category 1? 6 is not good enough. So I hope that, we want it to be 0, but clearly that's not going to be the case tomorrow. I hope that people will feel that they can report it, and I hope that this council will be more proactive, and it won't be single figure next time, it will be triple figures, because a lot of people are, like I said, suffering in silence because they're living in, poorly kept homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about HMOs, if I may. You mentioned you obviously undertook a lot of work in terms of visiting properties to check on HMO licences. You mentioned in I think 154 cases that there were areas that needed work. Can we take it that those were followed up so that there are kind of 0 areas that need remediation now? But I've got a couple of other questions as well. I wanted to ask about the link with. I'm aware that obviously there's your team dealing with the licensing side of it and the reviews on those, and then there's the planning team dealing with the management plan side of things. Now, obviously, from a local resident point of view, they just want to have a kind of single kind of point of contact and want to know there's joined up thinking between those 2 areas. Is that the case? Is there communication between those teams, so that if you've got a sort of a problem HMO owner, that is being recognised and worked on. And then my final question was about unlicensed HMOs, and I appreciate that's a tricky one. It's the unknown unknowns, and I don't think you gave us a figure in terms of how many of those you discovered, but do you have any sense of the sort of the magnitude of that problem across the city? Thank you.
So through you, Chair. So yes, the first point on licence conditions. So if we identify any sort of disrepair issues within a property when we're undertaking a HMO licence inspection, we've got different options available to us. So that could lead to issuing a notice, hazard awareness notice, etc. The general approach, and it depends on the severity of the issues, but if it's relatively minor issues, which it tends to be, where we'll consider this approach is that we'll add those as licence conditions. So the licence is only issued based on conditions being met, and we keep those cases open until those have been resolved. If they're not resolved within the time period that we set, then it will lead to further enforcement action. So yes, the answer is that with all of those have been resolved, that have been identified. So hopefully that answers that question. In terms of joined up working and communication, yes, the private sector housing team and planning team do work closely together. Each team has different powers and responsibilities, so there is slightly different areas of focus, but they do work closely together. I'm sure there's always room for improvement. I'm not sure if that question's born from experience of that not happening, but I'm not aware that that's been the case. But yes, they do work closely together, and there is that communication. And we have a problem property group. So if there's particular problematic properties, particularly if they're impacting on the wider community, they're discussed as a sort of multi-service in a multi-service group to look at how we can best resolve that. So looking at the various powers and different teams have to try and seek a resolution. So there is that active communication about those sorts of properties. And then finally, unlicensed HMOs. So we've got a reasonable picture on that. So the stock condition survey that we undertook last year, again, it's projected, but the figure that they came out with was very similar to the figure of licensed HMOs that we have. So we've got quite strong assurance that the number of licensed HMOs are the vast majority of HMOs. HMOs do change, so sometimes they'll be pulled out and converted back into family accommodation, and likewise they can, be converted from a family unit into a HMO. We feel that we have a very strong picture on that, and that we do have a good handle on those. What tends to be the ones that are unlicensed are Section 257 HMOs, so they're flats that have been converted pre, I think it's 1991 building regulations coming into force. So often that's because landlords don't realise that that's a HMO. There could be two separate flats in a building that's been converted. So as far as they're concerned, it's two flats, not a HMO, but it meets the conditions of a Section 257 HMO. So that's where where they tend to be unlicensed. We've had circumstances where we've become aware of a unlicensed HMO. So, for instance, somebody approaching us as homeless from a HMO that we weren't aware of. It is an offence to operate an unlicensed HMO, and we will take appropriate action if we identify those breaches.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I must say I've never seen a 50-page enforcement policy, so I'm hoping that we actually apply it, because I think some of us around this table may know some of the landlords of HMOs, frankly. So I hope it is firmly and fully applied. But can I just ask, on the other side of the equation, Chair, the reason people actually genuinely fear having an HMO near them is for practical reasons. The state of the property and the garden, noise and disturbance of the tenants. And obviously, this is done in conjunction with the Renters' Rights Act. and that's in the title, renters. And obviously the people in HMOs are renters. So clearly it's not a one-sided situation, is it? So what I'm asking is, we have a robust policy, so it appears, to deal with rogue landlords, and good for that. But what about the tenants, the renters, who this Act has been passed to protect, when they themselves are the cause of the problem for neighbours? Because people have often said to me, well, why don't we have a Neighbours' Rights Act? Because it seems that the law has now shifted so much that you've got people in HMOs, the state of the property, the noise and the disturbance, and the poor neighbours just have to put up with it because they don't have any rights. And now the law has gone one step further to protect the rights of renters, when in fact the renters could be the nature of the problem themselves. So how do you square this balance, and what are your comments on that? Because this is not a one-way street. I know many cases of where neighbours are at their wits' end because of the condition and the behaviour of tenants, and it really is totally unfair. They seem to have no rights at all, and the tenants are just, and it's the noise and disturbance in particular that bothers them.
Through you, Chair. So the Renters' Rights Act, so whilst it brings in additional security of tenure for tenants, it does bring in additional grounds for possession for landlords. So the intention is that it does also support landlords to take enforcement action where there's an evidence-based to do so. So particularly for serious and significant antisocial behaviour or criminality in a locality, then it helps to sort of speed up that process. So that's been built into the legislation, grounds to do that. So it shouldn't prohibit, the Renters' Rights Act shouldn't prohibit landlords from taking action in those most serious cases. In terms of HMOs, it forms part of the licence conditions for the landlord. So there's requirements around conduct and behaviour of the tenants. So that is something that potentially we can act upon for a breach of licence if that's evidenced and not addressed satisfactorily by the landlord. And I suppose more broadly, they have tenancy conditions or licence conditions which the landlord can seek to act upon, or utilise sort of wider powers and legislation. So the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act has powers around community protection warnings, community protection notices, which could be utilised if it's more significant noise nuisance. There's the Environmental Protection Act and noise abatement notices that could be used. So there's a range of tools and powers that could be used depending on the circumstances.
Just to follow that with one simple question then. So does the new legislation put more onus than before on landlords to control and be responsible for the behaviour of their tenants?
Through you, Chair, I wouldn't say that that's the intention of the legislation, to put more onus on landlords to control their tenants. So it gives more protection to tenants where they're acting, in a reasonable and in a reasonable way. What it does build in is the protection to landlords to take action where there are serious breaches or serious concerns, or for other grounds such as they wish to sell their property. So I wouldn't certainly phrase it that way, that it places additional responsibility on landlords to take action against tenants. There are additional requirements on landlords through the Act, but not specifically to then take enforcement action on tenants.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for this report. Absolutely welcome, and thank you to officers for all the work that they have been doing and that you do to improve housing standards in the private rented sector, which we know provides homes for increasing percentage of our population, and the amount of work around the HMOs absolutely illustrates the importance of having HMO licensing across the whole of the city. And I do recall in the past that some political parties thought that wasn't necessary. Absolutely, it's important that every home across the city is of a good standard. And clearly, you know, the Renters' Rights Act is a really, really important piece of legislation that is going to make a huge difference. So pleased to see, you know, that there's going to be a landlord forum, because actually, you know, landlords need to be better informed about their responsibilities and their rights, as well as tenants. So would encourage as many people as possible to attend those and to engage with that. So I've got a couple of kind of questions falling out from that. The first one is, it's my understanding that, so you refer to, you know, resource pressures during 2025. We have now, for the we have got some new funding to implement the Renters' Rights Act going into the new financial year. So I think it'd be useful to know what the quantity of that is, and obviously, you know, in due course, some indication as to the impact that that's going to have. And with the housing enforcement policy and the ability to enact civil penalties from enforcement work, is that potentially, you know, an income stream for the council? And is that sort of one of the intentions within the Renters' Rights Act as such? And then one final question, bear with me. Pleased to see about the Warm Homes local grant, because I know kind of my understanding is previous iterations of that actually weren't very affordable and weren't very accessible to the majority of households. This new scheme is more affordable and accessible. Are you saying that it's already oversubscribed? So is there kind of no point in, you know, promoting it to anybody else?
Through you, Chair. Okay, yep, thank you. I'll take those questions in order then. So, new burdens funding. So, we have been awarded new burdens funding. We received, I can't give the exact figures, but approximately £35,000, £36,000, there we go, for in the financial year 25-26, which was around sort of preparedness for implementation of the Act. As part of our, need to get the terminology to keep changing, homelessness, rough sleeper and domestic abuse grant, that also includes an additional allocation towards renters' rights, new burdens funding. So that's over the course, spread over the course of 3 years. I think it's higher in year one and then decreases in year two, and then I think year three there's no additional funding provided. And the intention that we're sort of proposing to utilise that funding is some additional resource in the private sector housing team, so to increase enforcement capacity, but primarily to place that within, will sit within our homelessness teams around tenant relation officer type role. So it's a function that we don't currently have, and that will be to provide advice, support, encourage people to report concerns about the condition of their property or around behaviour of their landlord. Will act in a sort of initial sort of investigatory capacity to sort of gather evidence. So one of the challenges around the enforcement of the Renters' Rights Act will be gathering evidence. So things like illegal evictions, sometimes we can kind of know it's happened or, you know, suspect it's happened, but it's getting the evidence to be able to prosecute is sometimes a challenge, particularly if we're dealing with more vulnerable tenants who, you know, may have other issues and not want to sort of support that evidence gathering process. So that's where that will be sat, and part of the reason for that is to try and adopt more of a preventative approach. So rather than just dealing with things happening and then having to enforce upon it, trying to prevent it happening in the first place, and to take sort of quick and early intervention. So dealing with a potential or a risk of an illegal eviction is much easier to deal with than somebody having been evicted and then dealing with the fallout and follow up. So that's the intention and the focus planned. In terms of CPN, community, civil penalty notice income. The intention is that essentially it will become self-sustaining. So whilst there's initial new burdens funding, the anticipation and sort of direction of through the Act and through the enforcement policies, that it will become will be able to generate income to reinvest back into enforcement activity. So CPN income is ring-fenced to enforcement activity, so it can't just be used for anything. And there isn't necessarily an incentive for us to just go out and dish out CPNs for anything and everything. It has to be proportionate and in line with our enforcement policy. But yes, it can be, it will be an income stream. The thresholds for CPNs has increased quite significantly. So the fines that we can impose have gone up. So again, the sort of level of income that could be seen could dramatically increase as we move forward. And there is a shift to taking more, if there's been an offence, rather than trying to resolve informally, it's more of a direction towards there's an offence issue, community civil penalty notice. So that might help that process as well. And then on your last point around Warm Homes Grant, so I didn't pick up that point in the presentation, but you're right, it has been oversubscribed. So we initially bid, so it's being delivered by the County Council on behalf of the City Council in conjunction with Malvern and Wychavon councils. And the application that was initially submitted, we didn't achieve that. Is applied nationally, so the amount of funding available was not enough to meet all of the applications that were submitted. So we received less than we would have hoped, and it has been oversubscribed. The scheme's only just recently launched. There's been some delays, partly due to the previous Green Homes Grant scheme, Hug 2, needing to be closed down before the new one could be commenced. But we've been engaging with County Council to try and establish a sort of prioritisation approach, so focusing it as much as possible on those most vulnerable households, so working with health colleagues to try and use data to help identify where the greatest need is. So it's not just first come, first serve, it's a bit more targeted, particularly as there isn't going to be enough to roll it out to all households that apply. So yeah, not the ideal situation, but hopefully we can target it in the best way possible.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question about relating to how the new Act does give landlords more rights to I don't know what word I'm trying to find here, censure or not control, but if there is antisocial behaviour of the type that Councillor Amos was describing, if that is happening, then I did read that they have powers to, to deal with it. Does that extend to the social landlords within the scope of this Act?
Through you, Chair. Not initially, but but registered providers have existing powers available to them. So essentially, the way that it currently works is that you've got two forms of notice. Essentially, a Section 21 notice, which where there's no fault grounds, so you don't have to give a reason or provide any evidence to serve a notice or pursue possession. It's a mandatory ground for possession as long as you follow the correct process. And then you have Section 8, whereby there's a range of grounds for possession in the legislation, and depending on what the ground for possession is will depend on how quickly you can seek possession, and what evidence you require. But it's an evidence-based ground, it's not mandatory. There are mandatory elements within there, so if it were sort of serious criminality, that could trigger a mandatory ground for possession. So that will apply both. So the answer, I suppose, is yes, it will apply for both the social sector as well as the private rented sector.
That's encouraging to hear. Is that something that your team might be able to help me with? Because I do have a case that's been open now for coming up for a year, and still no joy from the social landlord, and that the lives of the people having to live around one individual is hell.
Yeah, I mean, if you send them the details, we can look into it.
Thank you all. The recommendation for this item is that the committee notes the contents of the report, approves the implementation of the revised Worcester City Council Housing Enforcement Policy at Appendix 1 from the 1st of May 2026, and delegates authority to the Corporate Director of Operations, Homes and Communities in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of Communities Committee to make minor amendments to the policy in line with legislative changes and government guidance. Please, may I see a show of hands? Thank you. Super. Okay. Next up, we have item 7, the proposed committee scorecard for 26-27. Am I back to you, Tom, or am I Laurie? Back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual report that we bring to committee to consider and set the performance scorecard that is then presented and reported to this committee over the course of the next 12 months. So the intention of it is to provide a sort of headline picture of key performance indicators and corporate projects relating to this committee to enable scrutiny of performance to officers. So the existing scorecard has been reviewed and refreshed, and new projects have been added and some projects removed, largely due to them being completed. And I can touch base on those in just a second around what the proposals look like. Alongside the performance scorecard, you will see, I think it's as Appendix 2, a copy of the local outcomes framework. These were released by government in February this year, which surround an outcomes-based performance measurement, which applies across all local authorities and sets out a number of key national priorities to be delivered at a local level. So these will be applied across all of local government, and essentially as a means of assessing performance around a set of sort of standardised key performance indicators. So the vast majority of these relate to data that's already submitted through other routes, and we collect. And the intention moving forward will be that we will indicate which of the local outcomes frameworks indicators relate to this committee and feature on as part of the committee scorecard moving forward. There are a number of LOF indicators which will be reported. I think they're on the gov.uk website. So the intention is not to sort of replicate those within the committee scorecard and to retain the focus of the committee scorecard on some of the key indicators which we've drawn out of there. And I suppose the other point to raise is just that not all of the LOF indicators relate to the functions of the district councils, as some relate to the county council, so wouldn't be appropriate for reporting through to this committee. So if I move on to the proposed scorecard, so 4 of the existing projects and activities are due to be are proposed to be retained, with slight deviations to to the wording. Members will recognise a stronger and connected community strategy. So we are in the process of developing that, but to retain it over the course of the next 12 months, we're proposing to include delivery of that as well, so that we can report progress and delivery of our community engagement strategy over the course of the next 12 months. We've amended the project around feasibility and delivery of affordable housing to just the delivery of affordable housing. The feasibility has really been established and brought to this committee on a number of occasions through the housing enabling strategy, but we do recognise that delivery of affordable housing remains a key priority of this council and this committee, so want to ensure that we're able to continue to bring updates on a regular basis back to this committee. The private sector housing strategy remains a key priority, and therefore we intend to report activity back to this committee, and the leisure contract extension is just a date change to take us up until the 31st of March next year. New projects and activities include the delivery of the existing homelessness and rough sleeper strategy and development of a new homelessness and rough sleeper strategy. So we previously have had the delivery of a homelessness strategy as a project of this committee, so that's extending it to development of a new one as well as ongoing delivery of the existing one, and that will transition during the course of this year. We have a duty to develop a supported housing needs assessment and supported housing strategy over the course of this year, to be implemented by April next year, and therefore consider that that's an important piece of work and project for this committee to have oversight of and to receive updates about. Provision of temporary accommodation remains a key priority for us. We haven't previously reported that as a project, so enables us to keep members abreast with developments around the delivery of temporary accommodation. And as we've talked about this evening, implementation of the Renters' Rights Act. So whilst that will be implemented relatively soon after this scorecard's approved, obviously that's going to change the landscape significantly, so it gives us the opportunity to provide updates to this committee. The two projects to be removed are the delivery of the Promoting Independent Living contract. So I've mentioned that we're transitioning from that being delivered by Millbrook Healthcare to a new shared service model. That action no longer remains relevant, and we do report performance around the number of properties that adapted as one of our key performance indicators, and I've referenced the homelessness and rough sleeper strategy already. So we've updated the key performance indicators, and if I draw members' attention to the bottom, there's a number of performance indicators that are proposed to be deleted. Some of those relate to community engagement activity. The intention is not to diminish the impact and purpose of those, but to replace those with a new performance indicator, which will be focused more around our sort of new approach to community engagement of support to the VCSE and community groups. So we intend to capture all of the narrative around our approach to community engagement through a single performance indicator rather than the three that we have done in previous years. The other performance indicator which is being proposed to be deleted surrounds, it was a new performance indicator introduced last year, which related to the number of households in contact with the housing service that have access to accommodation. Whilst the intentions were well-meaning, actually reporting it has been problematic, largely because we're reliant on data coming through from registered providers to be able to fulfil that performance indicator, and the timeliness and fitting it in with the committee cycle doesn't align. So whilst we have been able to report it over the course of the year, it's not been a simple exercise, and it's proposed to stand that one down. We are proposing 2 additional performance indicators surrounding rough sleeping. So rough sleeping used to sit constitutionally with the Health and Wellbeing Committee, but these performance indicators didn't transfer to this committee that now has responsibility for oversight of rough sleeping. So we've added two different performance indicators focused on rough sleeping to be able to report those through over the course of the next 12 months. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom, for the report and the appendices. There's a lot to digest there. So it is kind of connected to the previous question I had about category 1, but it's a bit broader. So the target for the number of properties improved through the private sector housing team over the next year is 100. So I'd just like to know how was that target of 100 devised, and how, and this might be a bit of an unfair supplementary question, how does it compare to other cities of a similar size to Worcester? So, you know, is Gloucester trying to improve 100 private sector homes? Is 100 a standard number, or is it, you know, how have we come to that figure? Because it's 6 category 1, 100, that's quite a leap. So.
Through you, Chair. So I'd have to go back to recall how we arrived at the original target in 25-26. I mean, it's driven by demand, essentially, this target. So whilst we can set a target, it is dependent on the number of reports that comes through. So the 100 figure, so this performance indicator isn't just capturing number of category 1 or category 2 hazards. We do provide the narrative in the against the performance indicator of how many of those we've identified each time we come back to committee. But it will include where we've been able to improve conditions through informal intervention or activity, as well as formal enforcement routes. The performance of this performance indicator during the course of the past 12 months has been lower, so that's been reported through to this committee. And that's driven by the sort of lack of reports coming through to us. So the reason for retaining that at 100 this year was that we didn't want to decrease that to sort of fall in line with performance over the past 12 months, but to retain it at the target figure that we'd set at the course at the beginning of last year. So that's the rationale for it remaining at the same level for this year.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, could I just make a comment? Have I got it right on the actual targets of 25.6 and 6.7? They're all the same. Does that mean we're not being ambitious, or it's just an indicative figure at this point?
Through you, Chair. So there was a rationale for the target set against each of the performance indicators. So some of that's based on performance over the past 12 years. So where there's no rationale, no rationale to increase or to change that performance target, it's been retained at the same level. So some of those remain aspirational. So what this doesn't capture is the performance over the course of the past 12 months, which would probably be quite useful to be able to see where we were at, to draw some comparisons. So whilst the target might have remained the same, that could still be an aspirational target that we haven't been able to achieve in the previous year. There's also some of those performance indicators where we know there's been reductions in capacity. So it stays the same, but knowing that we're operating in a different environment, so would essentially be in real terms an increase in performance by officers.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm not convinced, but I'll leave it there. I can't see how the same target for next year is anything other than unambitious, but there's no point arguing the toss now. Although I must admit, I'm not quite sure why a KPI is how many people play tennis in parks, either for free or paying for it. It does seem extraordinary KPI for the City of Worcester to know how many people play tennis for free or not. But I'll leave that there, Chair. I mean, it's not a big point. It's just that it seems really a funny thing to have in the scope of the work that we do. But the one point I do want to make seriously is I'm amazed as a housing committee, and I would like it in, is the number of people on the housing waiting list. That should be a KPI. It's a fundamental question around which many of our policies are judged, and that should be aspirational. But there's no mention of it. So can we have that in, Chair? I mean, I can't see on earth why it's not in there.
Through you, Chair. So we had this debate, it would have been not last year, the year before, or the beginning of last year, sorry. So we did use to report the housing register as a key performance indicator to this committee. The decision was reached that actually it's not an indication of performance of the service or the council. It's an indication of demand, but isn't necessarily an indication of performance, which is the intention and the focus of this performance report. So whilst it's interesting and useful information, it doesn't necessarily reflect the performance of the team or service, but just gives a picture of demand on the service.
Well, Chair, with respect, I think that's utter nonsense. I mean, it does reflect something, because if the demand is constantly going up, that would raise the question of what's happening to the supply, or what's happening to all our policies to get people into housing, to get them off the streets, homelessness, temporary accommodation, and so on. All those things. If we just think, well, how many on the waiting list? It doesn't matter. It could double, but it doesn't indicate anything. I actually find that extraordinary, and it's not logical, and it's counterintuitive. I mean, how can you possibly say, well, we've got, say, 4,500 on the waiting list this year, and next year it's 5,000, but it doesn't tell us anything. What that tells me is the housing shortage is getting worse. And so my question would be at that point, what are we doing about it? If we're not interested, then we might as well not have any of these indicators, because none of them matter then, do they? They're all indications of demand, but that's true. But why is the demand going up? It may be because we're not doing our job as well as we should. And the whole point of an indicator is to judge ourselves on how we're doing. So I'm staggered with that answer, to be honest with you.
Thank you for your point, Councillor Amos. My understanding was that the issue that you're describing is captured in the other key performance indicators regarding homelessness prevention, temporary accommodation, but perhaps you could provide more of that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to note as well that throughout the course of the year, this committee will receive a range of reports. Some are on us trying to develop affordable housing, some around temporary accommodation, and we also provide a report on the annual homelessness and rough sleeping report. So there are many opportunities for members to discuss and raise issues or challenges with the housing register. The other KPI I would draw attention to, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, is the final KPI on the list, which is the number of households in contact with the housing service that have access to accommodation. So that actually shows the number of households that are gaining accommodation through the social housing register. However, if Councillor Amos wishes to seek an amendment to this report, he can and put that to members.
Yeah, yes, I don't want to delay the meeting. Nothing further to add, but I mean, it is bizarre, and my concern is that the idea that it doesn't tell us anything, I think, is fundamentally misunderstanding the situation. I mean, all these indicators tell us something, and the idea that at each meeting when we have these KPIs, I've then got to ask a separate question. Well, how many people on the housing waiting list this quarter compared to last quarter? Because I will be asking that. And it seems absurd that I have to do that because it's not included in this list. Unless there's some other agenda behind this, I don't know. But I want people ask when they say, how's your housing situation in Worcester? I say, well, housing list's gone up, but it doesn't mean anything. It means we could be doing a good job because the housing list weighting is going up because it's all demand-led. I mean, you know, it's just a nonsense, Chair.
Councillor Amos, are you happy to leave it with as it is? Are you happy to leave our scorecards proposal as it is, or are you?
Well, I'm simply asking if we can have this one indicator on that, that's all. I mean, we used to have it on, and then it was taken off. I mean, I didn't think I was asking for much, but if it's going to be an issue, then so be it. I have to ask the question separately on every meeting we have. So I'll give notice to the officers. I will be asking this question at every meeting we have and asking why it's not a KPI, because it seems to make a molehill out of nothing. I don't know why this information has got to be withheld.
I don't know if this would be helpful. Thank you, Chair. My recollection of when we had the debate about this was not so much about it being an important indicator or not. It was the effect, the extent to which this part of the committee's activity could actually influence it. So we have demand that we have and not enough supply. We know that. There are things going on around to try and address that problem, but they're not within the gift of the other KPIs that are on this list. It's just, it's the wrong, it's a square peg in a round hole to report it as on these KPIs. I think that's what we talked about. So it's not nobody cares, everybody cares. But it's not necessarily the right place to cover it here, is what I remember.
Well, Councillor Desire may well be right, because I can't recall having a debate where we were going to remove it, to be honest with you. Fine, take your word that we did. But, for example, I mean, if we take the one, which I thought was an absurd one, but happy to go back to it, about the number of people who play tennis in parks for free. I mean, what on earth does that tell us? Because what if that figure goes up? You're right, that tells us the demand's gone up, so more people play tennis. So what? So it's the same issue. But we're not having, if we can't ask these questions, we don't get answers, then, you know, people draw their own conclusions.
So just to answer the, pardon me, Chair. Just to answer the tennis question, that's in there because the council invests a sum of money every year to encourage free tennis uptake in our court. So that gives us an opportunity, our members an opportunity to consider whether use of that money is cost effective. So that's the reason that one is in there. I think what I'm hearing, Chair, is Councillor Amos making a suggestion for an amendment to the report for the inclusion of the housing register statistics. So I think that's one for members to consider. We as officers can do that. We've reported it before, but you know it's open to members to consider that and guide us.
So at this point, committee can vote on that amendment.
Yeah, to be discussed first, and then yeah.
We haven't discussed it. So sorry, Councillor Amos has made a point. I've suggested that this was a debate we had. If we're going to debate it again, I think it's a different thing, you know, and it can't be done in 2 minutes.
Councillor Lawrenson.
Sorry, I don't normally like to publicly state that I agree with Councillor Amos. I try to avoid that if I can help it. But I think he's made a very eloquent case for including that, you know, that information about the housing waiting list, because from that data you can, you know, look into all sorts of aspects of the council and improve performance. So I think you've made a very good case for including it, and I think we should all vote in favour of including it. So thank you.
Councillor Wilmore.
I think we've just got to be a little bit careful about confusing data with a KPI, because they're not the same thing. They're there, they have different uses and they have different purposes. And like Jill said, whose performance metric is it? If it's on this committee scorecard, we own it and we don't build houses. So it's not something that we can measure ourselves against as a performance metric, because it's not, we don't own it. So yes, it's data, and it's very useful data, and it's very important data, but it's not a performance measure, which is why I suspect it's not relevant to be on a scorecard.
Chair, can I suggest a compromise then? So the last indicator we've got on the proposed KPIs, which is around number of households in contact with housing service that have access to accommodation, we can work up some narrative each quarter to bring as part of that narrative, as part of that condition. I will withdraw my suggestion rapidly. Thank you, Tom. Well, I'm sure we can work it into one of those indicators and provide some narrative along the lines that Councillor Amos has suggested, as long as members are comfortable with that approach.
I'm seeing lots of nods around the room. I personally feel that this figure, and I've just confirmed that with Lloyd, is presented to us in reports about our number of people on the housing waiting list. And I do regard our KPIs as the things that are within our gift and as performance indicators. So from my perspective, that's where I'd stand. And it looks like committee. Oh, Councillor Denham.
Yes, I mean, I'm only subbing on this committee and therefore haven't participated in previous conversations about it. I absolutely take Councillor Wilmer's point. There is a difference between data and a key performance indicator. And arguably, housing demand in Worcester is more likely a KPI for the planning committee, and in terms of consideration that it's at planning committee that decisions are made on housing applications and conditions around affordable housing. It is an important data point, and it absolutely has a key impact on people's lives. The difficulty of getting we keep as a city council the housing waiting list, but to move people off it is dependent on our social landlords and has been illustrated. Working with them is challenging, getting data out of them is also challenging, it would appear. So I think it's not a measure of the performance of this committee.
I've not been privy to previous conversations around this, but it does seem to be a sensible, if I can propose a solution, that if there's an important bit of data that we would like to have that might help inform our conclusions, can we not delegate to officers that data point is included at an appropriate place in the reports, but that it is not a KPI? I mean, that seems... Yeah, okay, fine, that's... Yeah.
Well, right, so are we saying, Chair, through you, that that data will be in the report, but it won't be as a KPI?
That's correct.
Because just to confirm then, Chair, because I hope it is, because at each meeting then, I will be asking what that figure is. I'm disappointed with this debate because I would have thought there's a housing committee, which is largely what we are, that kind of information should not be readily available. I thought we're supposed to be open and transparent in local government, not finding a way not to produce some information and making it as difficult as possible. So if it's hidden within the report, okay, fine, I will find it. But I'm going to ask the question anyway, because I think that the public are entitled to that information, and I think they will be a bit bemused that we've had a quarter an hour, 20-minute debate asking why we can't have that information, because the information is readily available and we used to have it under a KPI and now something's changed. And that makes people I think it concerns people what's going on with the provision and the supply of information from this council. We should be open and transparent, and I'm sad that we've had a 20-minute debate trying to cover it up.
Thank you. I do think there is a point about looking at proposed scorecards in future alongside the data that we've had available to consider the target setting. That's a very good point. I look forward to you asking at all the meetings. I'm sorry you're disappointed, but thank you. Councillor Denham, I had you on my list. to go
Yes.
back to... Yeah.
Thank you. If only all councils were transparent. I didn't really want to comment on the sort of scorecard changes. I say not being familiar with them prior. On the surface, what we have here seems sensible, and I understand the value of targets and that those shouldn't be unrealistic but should be achievable and a measure of performance. I wanted to kind of put on record a huge thank you to Joe Payne, our Strategy, Performance and Development Officer, and the local outcomes framework. So this is the new framework from the government. Whilst many of us sort of cheered when the previous off-log regime and office disappeared, on the surface, this looks quite demanding. I'm grateful to Joe for actually turning it into understandable metrics and, you know, accompanied by the ambition statement. And I absolutely applaud, you know, within the covering report, the sentiment, if I don't know if that's quite the right word, no, that government expects, central government expects local government to work with partners to improve priority outcomes. And I think, you know, looking at the breadth of these outcomes, whilst there are only some, you know, directly applicable to this committee, that the totality of that list demonstrate that, you know, that we have a government that cares about outcomes and that does want to improve the lives of our residents and to ensure that there is, you know, opportunity and support for all. I did raise, it was only yesterday was Worcestershire Leaders Board, so that has the leaders of all the 7 councils in the county and the chief execs. And I did suggest that we might have a conversation about local outcomes framework at a future meeting. I was met with a degree of cynicism, to be brutally honest. And the kind of immediate feedback was kind of, well, who's going to enforce it and sort of so what? I think these are important measures and they are an indicator and an invitation to work with local partners in order to improve the lives of our residents and the outcomes for our communities. So I hope that we are able to work on these and to have conversations with partners in a spirit of positivity. And it seems to me this is absolutely the agenda for the new unitary council, where services won't be split between the 2 tiers of local government, and we will absolutely have the opportunity in terms of transforming Worcestershire of working together, to improve. Now, there's so many of these metrics to pick on. You know, school attainment is not relevant to the council at present, but, you know, physical inactivity is maybe a public health measure, but actually we have the leisure centres and we promote those and we have an interest in that. How to work together on those is absolutely the future, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation on this item is that the committee considers the proposed content of the Community's Performance Scorecard for 26-27. So we're looking for approval. That's correct, isn't it? So please, may I see a show of hands? Thank you very much. Okay. The final item on the agenda, Worcester City District Collaborative 6 monthly update. Lloyd, this is you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you say, this is the report that updates on the work of the Collaborative over the last 6 months. And just to remind members, the Collaborative is the sort of local vehicle for delivering our health and wellbeing priorities in line with the county-wide health and wellbeing strategy. So we've met 3 times, actually, not twice, since the last report, July, October, and most recently, January. The July meeting, and members will be aware or may recall that early last year, the group decided to focus their attention on those areas where deprivation was most challenging, so that being Brickfields and Warndon. And in July, we discussed how we can better focus services within those areas to target unmet need. So we discussed better use of the health van, provision of temporary localised vaccination centres, hazard identification within the homes using agencies such as private sector housing and the fire service, and the slipper swap sessions which had been run so successfully here at the Guildhall as well. We also heard from the Best Start in Life subgroup around some of the work that they were focusing on. That was around smoking and vaping cessation, promotion and support around breastfeeding, and good early dental health. And just to show the breadth of partners in the room, you know, our museum service also contributes to that Best Start in Life subgroup with the work they carry out during the school holiday period in particular. We're also very grateful to the Worcester City Primary Care Network. There was a period of hiatus around the health inequalities subgroup and the ageing well subgroup, but very thankful to them for stepping in and now agreeing to lead on those areas. And in particular, around the health inequalities subgroup, they were talking and looking to roll services out around walking for families, in October, we had a conversation around group membership, and I think for some time we'd recognised that there were some missing partners around the table. So again, this committee, I can't remember whether it was Health and Wellbeing Committee, we'd heard some strong evidence from primary and secondary education colleagues in the past, so we felt we needed to work to get those around the table. And bring back higher education colleagues as well. Social housing and Health and Care Trust were partners who we need around that table. So work has commenced and continues to try and bring colleagues in from those areas. And as we approach winter, the PCN also discussed and talked to us around the warmth on prescription scheme. And at 3.5, there are some figures there for members to note. The PCN also told us in October around work they were intending to launch around the Neighbourhood Frailty Forum. And again, that would have a positive impact on the ageing well work stream, and obviously fits in with the work we do around disabled facilities grants as well. And then again, in October, we had a really positive presentation from Citizens Advice about their information signposting project. So this is a referral process where people who are vulnerable or in need can be referred into that process, and it's a bit of a one-stop shop. You know, whatever support they need, and they can receive that from that referral pathway. And then most recently in January, we used the January meeting as our sort of strategic assessment meeting, and Public Health provide us with a bit of a State of the Nation presentation, very similar to what Matt Fung came to present to this committee in January. And that just allows us to check in as to whether the district collaborative priorities are still the right priorities to be looking at for the year ahead. Paragraph 3.9 sets out some of the indicators of concern for Worcester City. They won't come as a surprise to members of this committee. And again, we've also discussed childhood weight in the past as well as an indicator of emerging concern. And the outcome was that we felt that our priority work streams of Best Start in Life, tackling health inequalities and ageing well continue to be the right ones for the city. I think, Chair, that gives a flavour of what we've been talking about and what the group collaborative have been doing over the last 6 months, but happy to take any questions. Just to add, I suppose, as well, sorry, an omission on my part, we did discuss in January, and we will now continue to discuss the opportunities that Pride in Place offers us, given that it's focused on one of our key areas with Warnden. So many of the organisations and colleagues around that table have a huge role to play in supporting that project. So that will be a continuing discussion piece as we move through the next 12 months.
Thank you. Very informative update. Happy to open it up to the committee if anyone has any questions or comments.
Just one question, and apologies my sort of lack of knowledge on this particular group, but you mentioned the presentation that we had from Matt Fung from Public Health. Can I take it that I don't know if they're at this group, or if not, you have strong links with the sort of public health side of it, just to make sure that you're getting that kind of data flow through? Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor Kinsley. So Public Health are a key member of the District Collaborative Group. So absolutely, we work very closely with them. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very pleased to be here and to sort of see and receive this report as the previous lead for health and wellbeing and chair of a health and wellbeing committee when we had it as a separate entity. I absolutely, and I've attended the District Collaborative in the past. It's really good to see this work continuing and the partnership and those relationships continuing and good projects at a really kind of practical grassroots level being delivered, and the sort of data access that the primary care network have and connecting that up with partners in order to focus interventions that really make a difference is incredibly powerful. And actually it's an illustration of what I talked about in terms of the local government outcomes. This absolutely is a forum for delivering those outcomes, and bringing that range of partners together is potentially a basis for a future place-based partnership board for Worcester City, I would suggest, which is something that that council is considering, or that we need to look at as to who are our key partners, and in terms of our ambition for delivering for Worcester City. And it was interesting, I guess it's probably a couple of years ago, where we weren't certain actually of the correct role for us as a district council, but partners around the table at that time absolutely valued the role of the City Council in convening that forum. I don't know whether, do we still chair it? And the willingness of partners to come to the table, and that absolutely is an indication that it is a forum, it is a place where key information is exchanged and where agencies can get things done. So it absolutely is a really powerful forum. We had a presentation at group leaders, at the last group leaders meeting, on the indices of multiple deprivation, and a really kind of a detailed piece of work that Joe Payne had undertaken. And I wondered whether, is it okay? Are we going to be able to share that information with partners? Because I think within it, the level of detail at lower super output areas, different ones, and of the different measures of deprivation, which kind of vary across different parts of the city. I think that, is a really useful level of detail and analysis, which can inform the work of the district collaborative and some of the partners around the table.
Yeah, just to come back on that point, it's most definitely our intention to convert that into a presentable format for public viewing, and probably to host that on our website, because as Councillor Denham said, not only is it a useful tool for partner organisations, but I think it's also a useful tool for our members and our officers as well, when they're considering the work that they do.
Thank you all. The recommendation is that the committee notes the content of the report and in particular the work undertaken by the Worcester City District Collaborative since July 2025. So I'll just have a look and check that you look like you've noted it. Indeed. Thank you very much. Turn myself off, sorry. Item 9, any other business, of which there is none. So that's all, folks. Thank you very much. That's done.